Tell us how this Gerulata Technologies was formed and what's the story behind it.
There were some news circulated by some Russian sources that the company is associated with some foreign intelligence agencies.
How does it work? Just a very high level, could you explain? Let's say, for example, in context to either the war, in context to elections, in context to riots and racial events.
Sources like websites, blogs, different public officials. It might be political sources, it might be alternative media, different kinds of influencers, etc.
Let's talk about deepfakes. I've seen a lot of Elon Musk one.
I think that people are already kind of used to the fact that they shouldn't believe everything they see.
How optimistic are you of Slovakia?
Digital or technological perspective, I think there's a lot of talent here.
Hello everyone. Our topic today is combating disinformation. And joining me in this conversation is Mr. Michal Trnka. Michal Trnka is a prominent figure in Slovakia, known as the CEO of Gerulata Technologies, a company that focuses on combating disinformation and hostile propaganda using innovative AI tools. Michal comes from a notable family background, as his father, also Mr. Michal Trnka, is one of the co-founders of ESET, a globally recognized cybersecurity firm. Welcome, Michal, to Talks with Divya. I'm so happy that you are joining us for talking about a very important topic these days, which is disinformation, deepfake, and how AI is helping combat disinformation and misinformation. You are the CEO of Gerulata Technologies, and its mission is to combat hostile propaganda and disinformation. And I'll start right away with how this journey started, because as far as I know, this was a response to a personal experience that you faced where one of the companies that you were associated with became somehow the topic with, a victim of disinformation.
Yeah.
So tell us how this Gerulata Technologies was formed and what's the story behind it.
Yeah, so, well, you're correct that partially it has been inspired by my experience in the previous company where I worked in. Basically, the situation was that that's a cybersecurity company, and suddenly there were some news circulated by some Russian sources that the company is associated with some foreign intelligence agencies.
Wow.
And basically started to spread disinformation like this. Of course, even before that, I was aware of different kind of fake news, hoaxes, etc., but never experienced it from the first hand. And especially this disinformation being spread by a state actor, so it's not some some
private agents
on the internet, but actually a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So that was kind of in a way fascinating that something like this can actually happen. That these people actually really employ these tactics to pursue their goals. So that was, I would say, probably the first time when I was really starting to think about disinformation and how these information operations actually work, how much widespread they are, and what's the potential impact of these operations. So yeah, that was actually quite a long time ago, and there were many other contacts before I actually started Gerulata. So after I left the company, I was working with a couple of friends basically as an advisor or a consultant in the field of cybersecurity, kind of helping clients and basically people from journalists, from news, media, different kinds of journalists, etc., helping with them with cyber security incidents. And now what we've discovered is that many times the cybersecurity incidents were actually connected in some way to some kind of information threat or some kind of disinformation that has been circulated online. So then this is when I actually had to kind of tackle the problem in some kind of professional way, and really realize that we are actually missing tools to effectively evaluate, capture, analyze, and combat this kind of threats. So this kind of experiences kind of inspired me to think about what can be done, you know. And since I'm a guy from tech background, I was of course thinking about the problem in from the technological perspective. So what kind of software can be created? What would actually help the good guys, the democratic institutions to defend themselves against this kind of threats. So that's the story.
And it's such a fascinating story. Like you said, when you see this firsthand, the impact is extremely significant, and great that it resulted in a company like Gerulata Technologies. Tell me about the name, because when I was looking, it sounds very, I don't, it's the name is very unique, and I want to hear from you and from my audience, what is behind the name Gerulata?
So the name is inspired by a place, a location in the south of Bratislava. Gerulata is basically a archaeological site. It's a ruins of some Roman fortress. And I wanted some local name for the company. And this Gerulata, the antique Gerulata is basically was part of Limes Romanus, which was as you know, a system of defensive fortifications which protected the Roman Empire or the civilization at that time from different kind of raids and attacks from the barbarian world. So I kind of like the parallel that we also would like to
today's
protect
contemporary
civilization against the attacks of barbarians in the digital space.
Interesting, interesting. So let's now that we understand your motivation and inspiration behind establishing Gerulata, when you started, I think it's back in 2020, right? Were there a lot of players? That's the time when COVID had hit us as a society, as a world. Russia-Ukraine war was probably at the onset. Do you think this was as an opportunity by many tech, let's say, players in the field, or did you see a lot of competition or healthy competition, for example? What was the situation, the market that time?
Well, when I founded Gerulata, I didn't really knew about any other company doing that kind of technology or working in the same field. Honestly, didn't do a lot of market research beforehand. However, there are a couple of companies in this segment. Some were founded way before COVID, so we're kind of a new entrant to this field.
Okay, great. When I was going through some of the articles around this topic of the epidemic of disinformation and misinformation, often, we use both the terms interchangeably. Disinformation and misinformation, sometimes we take it as a similar term, but what I found is, and correct me if I'm wrong, misinformation is when there is no bad intent. But because your company, your mission statement is combating disinformation and hostile propaganda, and misinformation is kind of a subset, may or may not be a malicious intent, but disinformation is aimed with malice. Intent is bad. Am I right? Is that a right theory? Or
yes, I think that the definitions are correct. However, I would say that this perspective is a little bit limited in terms of what happens in the practical, in the real world. Many times the focus always of institutions and the public is on disinformation in the very narrow sense, which means something that is factually not true. So something that you can fact check if whether it's true or it's false. Now, when we're talking about online influence and different kind of like malicious foreign interference and manipulation. This is not necessarily limited to disinformation in this sense. So this might be all kind of different manipulative tactics, which are not necessarily true or false, but these are narratives that have been constructed with the malintent of undermining a society. So I would so when we talk about these kind of threats, we're talking about information threats, hostile information operations, hostile propaganda, etc. So it's not necessarily limited to disinformation. Also, what I would like to say is that for Gerulata, now working with disinformation is, I would say, a small part of our interest.
Yeah.
In general, we are focused more on the information domain from the perspective of open source intelligence. So basically, capturing and extracting valuable and relevant information from the huge pool of online data, which I mean includes social media, the web, etc. So and this doesn't necessarily have to be with the intent of combating hostile propaganda. That's part of what we do, but there are also other use cases.
Can you give us a kind of a real life example of how, let's take a propaganda on hand, a hostile propaganda. How does this open source technology and tool that you've built, how does it work? Just a very high level, could you explain? Let's say, for example, in context to either the war, in context to elections, in context to riots and racial events.
Yeah, so the core or the foundation of what we do is basically we capture publicly available information. So this is what is meant by open source intelligence. So we're working with open sources, which in practice means that things that have been made public with the intent of making them public. So in practice, that means we're gathering data from sources like websites, blogs, different public officials. It might be political sources. It might be alternative media, different kind of influencers, etc. So these kind of sources is something that we look at. We try to extract the information they publish and make this information available to the clients, which are typically government clients. Now, what they can do is they can use our tools to analyze what kind of information narratives, etc., are spreading in the information landscape. They can detect different trends. They can see whether there's some kind of narrative that is trending, that is spreading very fast. They can basically detect different actors and a network of different actors, etc. So it's a relatively complex set of tools. It's really it really kind of depends on the particular use case. So we work a lot with governments, but there are different use cases in the government sector. So one use case would be strategic communications, which is basically trying to communicate proactively, provide accurate, clear information to the public. And that, of course, includes reacting to any potential, whether it's disinformation, propaganda, or maybe just genuine doubt about what's going on. And this is what is important for these StratCom people is to kind of know what's going on, and so they can react in a communication way.
Right.
So that would be one use case. There are others. So of course, for militaries, it's more connected to gathering intelligence from hostile countries, etc.
Michal, tell us about this universal graph technology or universe graph technology. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. What does it do and what's its significance?
So universe it's a brand name for our graph technology that we've developed in Gerulata. And basically the idea behind this is actually quite simple. So social networks and webs are not, pockets of isolated, communities. It's a network.
Yes.
And it's basically an ecosystem. When we're looking at the information landscape of a country, you have typically thousands of different actors, which means media, influencers, politicians, different kind of institutions, etc., NGOs, etc. And this basically forms an ecosystem. All these actors have different motivations. They have different patterns of activity. They basically engage in different kind of activities online, but they interact with each other. So the idea behind the universe is we are trying to capture information on how these information actors are connected. So how they interact with each other, and how information typically spreads through the information landscape. So in practice, this might mean that you have a country, let's say you have a country like Slovakia or any other European country. And if there's like an information operations, many times these narratives are formed outside of the country. So let's say it might be in some social media environment of a hostile country. And then these narratives basically have to be imported into the information environment of the target country. So this happens usually through some specific entry points, which might be, some proxy media established by the foreign services, etc., or it might be,
Or a hacker
completely.
could just
Might be
trigger.
organic, might be, different kind of like hackers or like black hat people, or it might be different kind of alternative media who are basically just after the money. They try to generate clicks
for monetization purpose.
for monetization, exactly. So now our technology allows you to create a map of the ecosystem. So basically you see that, okay, so typically narratives are originating in this group of sources. They are, let's say, maybe translated or brought into the information sphere of a country through other sources. Then there is some amplification. Basically, you can identify how it happens, who are the key amplifiers, etc. So to summarize it, I would say that this is a technology that kind of allows you to map the typical interactions in an information environment, and and identify the key patterns of activity. So this is very important if you are after deciphering how information operations happen. You really need to identify different patterns of coordination, different groups of actors, etc. So this is what the technology helps you with.
So while we are on the topic of technology, and I promise this will be the last question on the technology before we move into more of a philosophical and a social, perspective on this. When you're building such advanced disruptive tools, the industry is moving so fast, it's so dynamic. What are the challenges for your product team to catch up and to make sure that you are able to combat, or you're able to scale and match the pace of the industry? You know what I mean? Because it's changing every day and with new tools and technology. And even from a resource perspective, from a manpower skill set, are you facing challenges, A, from a tools and technology, and B, keeping your people skilled, upscale to keep delivering?
I would say I was very lucky with people. So we have a fantastic team that is, in my opinion, doing a world-class job in what we do. Now, of course, there are challenges. I would say the biggest source of technical challenges is the thing that many techniques or many approaches work in a lab environment, but then when you scale to the real world and you are facing the massive amount of data, now this presents a lot of technical challenges. So So the scale itself is one problem. Now, when you were asking about the talent or the skills, yes, of course. I mean, I think for every technological company, people are the key, and finding the right people is not always easy. It's actually pretty hard these days, or maybe it was hard all the time.
Always.
But yeah, so that's something that we also have to tackle, of course.
So moving back to the topic of disinformation, the challenges, one of the challenges came from your own personal account and journey that you mentioned before. But what are typical threats and challenges that democratic bodies face, you know, with disinformation? Like,
Yeah. So this is a complicated question. I will try to answer from my perspective. I'm not a complete expert on strategy communications. I'm more like a technology guy. But from my perspective, there are many different aspects. One of the aspects is that, first of all, these institutions are many times not the most flexible ones. So government is typically slow to react. Things take a lot of time. These structures are very formalized, which means that it is not very easy to flexibly react to whatever is happening on the internet, and social media is like the fastest environment there is. So I would say this is one line of challenges, and another one comes from the fact that basically it's not completely easy to understand what's going on online. And this is actually the part that we are trying to help with. So many times these institutions are not completely aware of what's going on. So they even might be able to react, but that they might not be aware of the threat. So this is the part that where we are trying to help. Then, of course, is the dimension of balancing how active the role of government should be in these issues. Of course, there might be a lot of controversy related to freedom of speech, but this doesn't necessarily mean that the governments would be doing some kind of censorship work or turning blocking websites, etc. But still, even if they take a slightly active role in the communication sphere, it might be perceived as some kind of government propaganda, etc. They also many times struggle with separating what is the strategic communications of a country as opposed to political communication of the government party. So separating these two is not completely easy. So there are many challenges like this. From my perspective, most of the governments in the West are struggling with implementing a successful strategy.
so Michal, who are your typical clients, customers? I understand public organization and government are
Yes.
one, but if you could give us an overview of your clientele.
Yeah, basically, so it's I would say 95% it's government institutions. The biggest part of our clients would be military, which they have very different use cases compared to Stratcom, which we have been talking about. So that would be probably the biggest part. Then the next part would probably be Stratcom people, researchers in academic institutions.
All right, let's talk about deepfakes. Yeah. Some, we all are familiar with the word. A lot of us may not understand what it means. Could you explain in short what are deepfakes?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of simple. So it's basically typically a fake video or a fake image of something or someone, which has been generated using artificial intelligence, typically. So the part deep, it means is from deep learning, as in neural networks. So I'm pretty sure that most people today have seen at least a couple of examples of deepfakes. They are very common, of course, not necessarily in the disinformation world. They are used in advertising, entertainment, etc. So I think that people are kind of familiar with the technology. At least they know that it exists.
I've seen a lot of Elon Musk one. And in fact, I've heard one of those where he actually spoke about a certain investing in a certain Bitcoin firm, and that was a deepfake video.
Yes.
And that led to a lot of investors in financial losses.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, so the deepfake technology is abused in a number of ways. It might be disinformation, which we see quite a lot, but it might be also, less poetic cases such as, yes, scamming, so crypto scams or other kind of financial scams, trying to make people believe that, this is a really good idea to invest into something.
And do you see this going to be the evolution of deepfake? Are you worried about how it will evolve into a major threat? What is your personal opinion? And where do you see this going, the deepfake technology?
I think that from our perspective, that's the security perspective. I'm not talking about the scams, but the disinformation part. I think that people are already kind of used to the fact that they shouldn't believe everything they see. And this is not only the deepfakes; it's been with us for decades basically. So people are pretty much used to the fact that you can use Photoshop to create really realistic images. Let's say Hollywood movies invest a lot of money and effort into making some fictional stories really looking realistic, indistinguishable from reality. But still, people, of course, don't believe that what they see in the movie is a reality. Yeah. So what I'm trying to get to is that the technology side is maybe not that important. The technology, the deepfake technology, is, I think, mature enough that it can really produce, excellent, 100% realistic images and videos that even trained people,
right,
I think, wouldn't have any chance to distinguish from reality. But the trick with deepfakes and why they don't pose such a threat, in my opinion, is that people don't decide what to believe solely on the visual input. So they also take the context into account. And that's where the disinformation actors actually struggle. So they can create a deepfake of a politician, saying some outrageous things. But does it really work? Well, people don't believe it because it's not believable. Yeah. It's completely, absurd many times. So if you want a deepfake campaign to be really successful, the threat actors have to invest into, first creating the context. Yeah. So the actual deepfake can then be, something that has to be believable. That what you see in the video is something that you can imagine that, okay, so this might actually happen. And this is something that that actually takes much more sophistication on the side of the attackers, and we didn't see many campaigns like that. Yeah. So usually it's like very simple, not sophisticated, very crude. They just create some video or an audio deepfake where usually a politician or a public official is saying some outrageous things, but nobody really believes that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, most part, I think I agree with you, Michal, but sometimes I feel that when AI started becoming a major tech trend, the big fear amongst the society or people was AI taking away your jobs. But in my opinion, AI taking away jobs is less of a risk than now when I see these disinformation, deepfakes influencing us as society in radicalizing us. And I've seen it firsthand in my country during elections. In Slovakia, we have seen it. When I opened Facebook, it's ridiculous the way people that we know, our close friends and family, get influenced from those news bites and those videos which are not authentic. So I think in some way we need companies like yours who are building AI, using AI technology and tools to make some, how can AI make those rules and, a balance between, spreading free or using free speech versus putting a right control. You know what I mean? Like, that's my
I
fear.
agree. I agree. My point is that deepfakes are currently, I would say, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And as with the iceberg, the real threat is below the water, is what you don't really see. So I think that, yes, of course, I mean, deepfakes are something that contributes to the overall problem with disinformation, but there are much bigger threats coming from actually the AI world, which have more impact on societies and are not being discussed because they are not maybe so fancy as deepfakes.
Okay.
So, for example, we believe that the content itself is okay, so that's important. But what is even more important today is being able to deliver the content to your audience. So now when you create a page on Facebook or you start a Twitter account, you start with 0 followers and you need to build the followership. You as a podcaster, you know that, of course. So, and that's typically a challenge, and it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of effort, and it probably takes a lot of money. And this is not easy to do. And it's especially not easy to do on scale. So when you are some kind of hostile propaganda actor, it's not very easy to create this. It takes a lot of effort. Now, with AI, with generative AI, now it is possible to automate a lot of this effort. So what we see quite often is this, what we call algorithmic media. It's basically just IT systems that gather data from the internet and produce automatic articles, memes, videos, etc., and post it. Not necessarily political or some propaganda content. It's usually just some kind of entertainment.
Yeah.
So something that people follow because it's funny.
Yeah.
And then after they build the followership, they start feeding in the actual message that they would like to get to the people. So now this is something that generative AI made possible. I mean, before it took a lot of investment. You actually had to really hire people to operate these troll farms. Now you don't need people to operate troll farms. You can have an algorithm instead of that. So in my opinion, that's a much bigger threat than the deepfakes, which are kind of discussed a lot. But the real damage, I think it's quite limited.
I understand. Interesting. Let's talk about a bit of a personal life, if I may.
Right.
So like I said at the beginning, you have a legacy which I'm sure you're very proud of. You come from a notable family line. Your father also, Mr. Michal Trnka, was one of the co-founders of ESET, a cybersecurity firm, which was established in the days when Slovakia was itself coming out of, let's say, the communist hangover or setup. You were probably young child then.
Yes, I am.
How was it growing up when looking up at and the activities of your father and his colleagues in this technology? Did that influence you from the very beginning? Was it something that
Oh yes, I think it influenced me a lot. Well, growing up like that was actually pretty cool. I always liked computers, technology, and basically it always been part of my life because of my father and his business. So of course, I think it influenced me quite a lot.
I was just curious because we don't have him. We'd love to have him here, but what inspired him? Because that's something that you wouldn't think from, like I said, a country that had just gained, let's say, democratic independence, if not independence in any other way, but was coming out and it was a new democracy. I don't even know if it was still
So they actually started even before the revolution
Yeah.
with the product.
So if you could give a little snippet of what, conspired or inspired and how did ESET was formed?
I think it's in some aspects it's slightly similar to the story with Gerulata. So basically, ESET was established not only by my father but also with a bunch of other people, and they came across a first computer virus back in the 80s. Basically, they understood that okay, so this is a problem for many people because we are more and more reliant on computers. Computers play an important role in the society, and they will probably play even more important role in the future. So they were right about, they understood that this is a problem that maybe looks a little bit small right now, but it will probably get much bigger, and society, humanity needs some kind of solution. It needs some kind of protection against this new threat. So basically, they created a first like antivirus, which was like
30. Was it Nord 32? Excuse me.
So Node 32 was much later. The first thing they created was basically an antivirus that was targeted to that one virus that was at that time. So it wasn't like a complete antivirus solution, but it was something, a utility that would help people to, get rid of that. And I'm not even sure if they thought of it as a business at that time. Probably just wanted to help people get rid of the virus. But then, it grown and it took off. Yeah. So
great. That's a great story. So, Michal, as we come towards the end of the conversation, I know you're very busy and I really appreciate you giving us these few 30, 40 minutes. I still want to know a bit more about you. Like, you have such an important agenda on your shoulder. It's social, it's, technical, it's, it has a widespread global impact. So you're a very busy man. But when you're not, at work, when you're not thinking about saving the world from disinformation, what kind of information do you consume? Like, what do you read? What do you like to watch? Tell us a bit about your personal hobbies and interests.
a lot of different things actually. So yeah, I like watching TV series with my kids. I like to spend time with my kids actually if I can. That's the best for me. I like to spend time in nature specifically with them. So that's my weekends are usually we're going out somewhere. So when you ask about books, so it's different. I don't read that many books, honestly. I read mostly on the internet, which is, I think, most people do today. If I read a book, it has to be, something that I really want to read in paper form. And it might be different things. So right now I bought some very old versions or publications of stories by Jaroslav Foglar, which is a Czech author. Is basically very famous for his books for boys, and I used to read these when I was a kid, and now I just want to read them again. So
How cool! How cool! Great. So, any last word advice for the future CEOs or entrepreneurs who are looking into starting a technical venture and making similar global impact from your personal learning? Any word of wisdom?
yeah, that's hard. I'm not sure if I'm in a position to give advice to other people, and I really think that there is like no recipe, So I think the most important is that you do things that you enjoy doing. So for me, I enjoy a good technical challenge. For other people, it might be something else that you really need something that motivates you internally, because there will be hard times and you need some internal motivation to push through that. So yeah, also I believe it's important not to be afraid to tackle big problems. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean that you will solve the problem to the point that it will disappear or go away completely, but even like incremental solutions to big problems can really mean a lot and be a lot of mean a lot of value. So yeah, I would say yeah, something like that.
Okay, Michal, I promise this is the absolute last question. How optimistic are you of Slovakia as a society, as a democracy, and as a digital consumer?
Very optimistic, actually. Yeah, I think Slovakia is a fantastic country. I think it's a very good place to live in. And from the digital or technological perspective, I think there's a lot of talent here. You know, we might not really have that many, you know, these kind of unicorns that everybody is looking for, but I'm not sure if that's really that important. There's a lot of very successful companies that can really compete with the best in the world. Yeah, I think there's a lot of technical talent, so I'm very optimistic. Yeah, of course there are many people, you know, leaving for one reason or another, but I think this is what happens, you know, everywhere to a certain degree. So I wouldn't be very skeptical because of that. So yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think the country will do good.
Great. And thanks to leaders like you. Once again, thank you, Michal, for joining me in this conversation. Thank you for so many valuable insight and sharing a bit of your personal journey and stories. I hope we'll do this again in future. But for now, I just want to wish you good luck in all your future endeavors and what Gerulata is doing.
Thank you very much for having me.